Sonia was driving, and Eva was not sitting in the passenger seat. Instead, her editor, Janechka, was accompanying her for a 2,662 kilometers road trip. Eva only needed Roman with her, and she had convinced him to embark on this journey with her. What she truly sought was an escape from recent events. "Why don't we take a plane? It would only take 3 hours," she suggested to him. "Because I don't like airplanes," Margot replied dryly. Her thoughts were elsewhere. Margot was a renowned writer, but editors found her difficult to work with. They considered her selfish but undeniably talented. She was like a shipwrecked sailor, and editors were the mice fleeing from the sinking vessel. She might be just an ordinary 33-year-old woman, but she had seen enough in her life. After finishing college with a management degree, she had interned on a farm to gain some practical experience. To land a permanent job at the magazine, Margot had to move mountains. So far, she was invisible, and nobody took notice of her. She was diligently performing all her tasks and following the management's orders. Still, her name was only associated with someone who could fetch coffee. Sonia felt deeply saddened by this. She envied the girls around her who were easily noticed, primarily for their looks, and were hired without further questions about their qualifications or work experience in other firms. One evening, while sitting in her rented one-room apartment, feeling dejected after another unsuccessful job interview, she absent-mindedly stared at the television, playing a show featuring a famous star. The celebrity shared stories from her past, mentioning that she had once had a stalker at the beginning of her career. In that moment, something clicked in Margot's mind, and a plan began to form. She decided to find a way to grab attention and make herself stand out. What she needed was a stalker. Just as this thought started to develop, her phone rang, and her mother's number appeared on the display. "Hello, how are you? How's work?" her mother inquired. "Hi. You always call me with the same questions," Margot replied, sighing. "But didn't you promise to start earning a decent living and get us out of this town?" Her mother began to shout. "If you have everything, I'll hang up," Margot said. And without waiting for a response, she hung up the phone. She started contemplating her idea further. The next day, during the team's gathering in the cafeteria, she cast her line, telling everyone that she had been followed by a guy in a black hoodie the day before. Initially, her colleagues paid little attention to her story until a girl named Vika delivered the news that there was a new report in town about a potential maniac, warning young girls to be careful. Margot saw an opportunity in these rumors, and it was not long before even her boss noticed her. He even offered her rides home several times. Her colleagues suggested contacting the police, but Margot insisted that everything was fine. She believed that things were finally improving. However, during the next team meeting, she found herself assigned the same coffee-fetching role. Frustrated and dejected, Margot burst into tears, left work, and headed home. Inside her house, opinions were divided on whether she should continue or quit her job. Margot decided to quit her job and pursue her dream of becoming a writer. Her mother called her every day, persistently urging her to change her mind. When her savings ran out, she had to leave her apartment and didn't know where to turn. Sitting in a cafe, counting her last pennies, a young man approached her. He was tall, had brown hair, and captivating brown eyes. She instantly fell in love with those eyes. Ivan, that was the guy's name, offered the young woman a cup of coffee, and Margot agreed. After chatting for a while, she opened up about her problems. Ivan offered to help Margot. With nowhere else to go, she accepted his offer. It turned out he lived in a house not far from the cafe and allocated the room for her. He promised that he would only charge her rent when she became a famous writer. They began living together, with Margot slowly working on her first novel, while Ivan worked as a remote programmer. They took turns cooking and enjoyed pleasant evenings together. As time went by, Ivan started to realize that he liked Margot, not only as a person but also as a woman. Margot felt the same way, and they began dating. Their relationship developed rapidly, but at one point, Margot began to wonder whether she was the only one Ivan liked. She felt there might be others like her. Months passed, and the initial romance in their relationship faded away. Ivan increasingly locked himself in his room, working. One day, he came home extremely upset because a client was dissatisfied with his work and demanded revisions. He was furious, shouting about how the client didn't understand anything. Margot asked what had happened, and Ivan explained that the client was a real fool. He yelled and slammed the door to his room. Sonia wanted to calm him down, but realized that it was better not to touch him in his current state. On the same evening, she received a call from the publishing house to which she had sent her first novel, and they informed her that they liked it. "We would like to send you a contract for review," said the person on the phone. Yes, of course, Margaret happily agreed. She was thrilled that someone had genuinely liked her manuscript. I've sent it to your email. If you want to make any changes, just let us know, and we can discuss it. Okay, Margaret replied and hung up. She wanted to share the good news with Ivan, but he had left the room right after dinner. I want to talk to you seriously, he said. Go ahead, Margaret responded. I want you to move out of this house. We need to break up, Mason told her. But why? What did I do wrong? Did you find someone else? Margaret asked sadly. It's not about you. You're disrupting my work, he replied dryly. She got up from the table and started packing her things. The next morning, she was no longer in the house. At times, Ivan regretted his decision to treat her that way, but it was too late. He even wanted to win her back, but he had no idea where she had moved. Margaret returned to the suburbs to live with her mother and sister. After signing the contract with the publishing house, she adopted a pseudonym by which, in no time, even school children would recognize her. Margaret's mother, Camilla, did not approve of her choice. Margaret loved her mother and sister, and she continued to support them until she received her first payment. She only kept a small portion for herself, as she wanted to ensure her family's well-being. The readers and the publishing house demanded more, and Margaret completely immersed herself in her work. Her stories were so incredible that it was hard to believe a person could come up with such tales. The buzz around her grew, and after a year, she returned to the city. With an overwhelming workload, her readers clamored for a chance to meet the author and get her autograph. When Margaret grew a bit tired of this frenetic pace, she asked for a creative break. Her chief editor, who published her books, proposed that she work from home with a personal editor. Margaret agreed, but it turned out she had very high expectations. As a result, rumors circulated among young editors that she was difficult to work with and extremely demanding. She didn't write for several months until a person named Evgeny, Eugene or simply Xenia, entered her life. They quickly found common ground, and Margaret resumed her writing. As for Camilla, she wouldn't leave her daughter alone. She constantly demanded money, claiming that they had spent a fortune on her during her childhood. Margaret silently transferred her substantial sums. Her sister, Eva, completed her 11th grade, and it was time to think about college. However, everyone understood that Eva wouldn't be able to get into a decent institution, which Camilla found unacceptable. Camilla decided to rely on her elder daughter to cover the cost of the younger one's education. You see, our Eva is already trying her best, said Camilla to Margaret when they met. Just help her with a tutor, Margaret responded. But have you seen how much they charge for a single tutoring session? We don't have that kind of money. Her mother began to cry. Margaret was well aware of all the tactics her mother used to try to extract more money from her. Well, try talking to the school teachers. Maybe they can help her catch up, Margaret suggested. I've asked them, but they all refuse, replied her mother. Margaret knew it would be easier to pay for her sister's education than to explain to her mother that money doesn't grow on trees. Fine, I'll pay, but this is the first and last time, she declared. Her mother and sister disappeared from her life for a while. During this period, Margaret managed to save some money for herself. She planned to buy an apartment and found a suitable option. She took a loan for the remaining amount and acquired the apartment. It was simply gorgeous, with new renovations, bright rooms, and panoramic windows that faced a park, a dream for any young woman. When Margaret moved her belongings into the new apartment, Eugene helped her arrange everything. As she looked around, she couldn't believe that this was all hers. She realized that no one would kick her out from here, even if she ended up broke. That evening, they celebrated the housewarming with Eugene saying, "Congratulations on your new home." And Margaret replied with a laugh, "Thanks. Just hope my mother doesn't find out." But Camilla found out about her daughter's purchase even faster than the sun rose, and within 2 days, she was standing at the doorstep with Eva, who was already attending university and living in the dormitory by then. "Hello, daughter," Camilla said, entering the apartment and looking around. "Hello. How did you find out where I live now?" Margaret asked. She had hoped to have a few peaceful months. "Little birds singing," her mother replied, and Eva couldn't help but smile sarcastically. Camilla continued by inspecting the entire apartment, from floor to ceiling, and then settled in a chair near the writing desk, where she picked up a piece of paper with Margaret's notes for her new novel. "Maybe you could offer us some tea," she suggested. Margaret went to the kitchen and returned with tea and cookies. "It's a 3-bedroom apartment," Camilla observed. "Yes," Margaret confirmed. "There's plenty of space for you alone." Sandra realized her mother was about to ask something of her. "And Eva's cramped in a shabby room in the dormitory while you're living alone in such a palace." She started playing on Camilla's emotions. "What do you want, mother? Speak plainly," Margaret replied firmly. "I want you to host Maria for the duration of her studies. I'll feel better if she's under your watchful eye," Camilla said with a smile. "I'll behave well. I'll be as quiet as a mouse," Eva added. Margaret agreed to her mother's request. That her sister was better than her mother. Margaret pondered for a moment and finally agreed, with one condition. "No guests or boys allowed to disrupt my work," she told Eva. Her mother, Camilla, came to her younger daughter's defense, saying, "What boys? She's still very young." That evening, Eva moved her belongings from the dormitory to Margaret's apartment. Sanjit allocated her the room furthest away, hoping that this would limit their interactions. The sisters had different daily routines and only crossed paths during dinner. Margaret made an effort to inquire about Eva's activities, while Eva reluctantly replied. Their distant relationship stemmed from the fact that Eva had always been their mother's favorite. While Margaret constantly sought her mother's attention when she was younger, she only succeeded in getting noticed when she began earning money. This lack of common ground and an emotionally distant history made it challenging for them to bond. The sisters also maintained a certain level of indifference towards each other. Eugene, Margaret's editor, visited her 4 times a week, sometimes staying for dinner. These evenings were much more enjoyable, as he was not only handsome but also jovial, witty, and often the life of the party. Margaret appreciated the twist of fate that had brought them together. However, sometimes she wondered why they were just friends and not a couple. Rumors often circulated about them being a couple, but she didn't have an answer to this question. This arrangement continued for 6 months, and Margaret had grown accustomed to having her sister around. Maybe, just maybe, things were finally falling into place. Camille asked Margot for a place to stay for a while, hinting that she had no other place to stay since their family home in the suburbs had been seized by the state due to debt. She admitted that she hadn't seen the demolition notice because of the gerrymandering. Camille asked if Margot had anything for her. Margot offered to let her see things while Eve prepared a tincture of motherwort in a shot glass. Camille replied that she had nothing, since she'd burned all the papers, thinking that way her house would remain untouched. When Eve brought the medications, Margot slipped her mother one of them, whereupon she told her that she needed to move out by tonight. Margot agreed to let her mother stay at her house, but soon found that their living together was becoming a real challenge. Camille began to impose her rules, which interfered with Margaret's work, and scandals began to occur almost every day. Margot couldn't stand her mother watching TV all night and yelled at her to turn it off because she wasn't watching anyway. Her mother would reply from the kitchen that she couldn't work in absolute silence. The family conflicts only intensified. Margot, tired of the family discord, decided to take her mother's headphones and turn off the TV. She then handed the phone to her mother, saying, "Take this, or better yet, leave the house while I work. You haven't forgotten that I'm the only one here making the money you all live on so beautifully." Having stated this, Margaret walked away, leaving her mother with her eyes incredibly wide open. For the next month, Genya took Margot to work at his place, as deadlines became critical and the affair was not yet over. The first time Margot entered his apartment, she expected to see dirty socks and mountains of dirty dishes. However, the apartment turned out to be clean, and Margot even complimented Genya on the orderliness. She was pleasantly surprised, as she had never been to his house before. Walking into the hall, Margot noticed a lot of family photos. This prompted her to ask, "Genya, I've had a question for a long time, but it's a personal one." Genya told her to ask. She wanted to know why there was no girlfriend in the photos with him. He explained that she just wasn't in his life, and she doesn't pay attention to him as a guy. To her, he's just a friend and coworker. Margot learned that the girl is their coworker at the newsroom. She was flooded with questions, and Genya revealed that she just isn't interested in him as a boyfriend, but she knows him very well. Margot said she wouldn't ask any more questions, since they had come here to work, not talk trash. Genya quickly got to work, pulling out his laptop, and they worked until the evening. As he drove Margot to her house, she began to wonder what the kind of girls Genya looked like. She wanted to ask about it, but decided to wait until tomorrow, when they would work at his place again. She said goodbye to Genya and walked into the entryway. There she happened to meet her mother's friend, Lyudmila Andreevna, the one who was happy to see Margot and asked about her business. Margot asked why Lyudmila Andreevna had bought such a modest apartment, considering that from the sale of the house she would have had money for something bigger. Then Lyudmila Andreevna asked which house she was talking about. Margot mixed up her words and said she had forgotten which house she was talking about. The woman was surprised and looked at her with a questioning look, and Margot quickly corrected the situation by saying that she was just too tired and had brought up the wrong thing. They said their goodbyes and Margot hurried home. When she entered the apartment, she saw Camille busy folding laundry. Margot accused her mother of deceiving her and yelled that she'd been cheated out of her money by selling the house. Camille explained that she had to sell the house because of debt. Margot was shocked and accused her mother of not saying anything about it. Ava suddenly intervened and accused Margot of knowing about the situation and pretending like she didn't know anything. Margot left the room, giving an outward sign of anger, and gathered her things to change. She hailed a cab, hoping that her editor, Genya, was already home and awake. As she left the apartment, she yelled to her mother that she would leave her keys with the neighbors so she wouldn't see them again, and left. In the cab, she got caught in traffic, and as she watched the lights outside the window, she calmed down and started thinking about the woman wife liked, trying to distract herself from thoughts of her mother. She went through all the girls from her office in her mind and settled on Nika, who she thought was the one who suited Genya best. The cab stopped outside Genya's house, and the driver stepped aside to prepare the bill. Margot bowed out and knocked on the door. The door opened and Genya appeared, dressed in his pajamas. Seeing Margot, he quickly came to his senses and asked what had happened. She began to tell, with bitter tears and much verbiage, about how her mother had cheated her and how she felt like she was just a purse to her family. Genya, taking Margot's bag, led her into the apartment and sat her down on the couch. He then made hot chocolate in the kitchen. Margot, already calmer, told the details of the situation to her friend and how she was tired of being a financial support for her family. Margot felt a deep resentment and a desire to isolate herself from everyone except Genya. At that moment, she realized that what she wanted more than anything in the world was for Genya to just hold her. She had noticed how he had become a true friend to her, always supporting her in every situation. Although they had always been co-workers, nothing else had ever happened between them. They finished their hot chocolate in silence and Genya led her to a place where she could sleep alone. Margot fell into a deep sleep. In her dreams, she dreamed of a dense forest inhabited by many animals that looked at her with red eyes. She tried to run away from them, but she could not. Those eyes seemed to be everywhere, and they might not have belonged to beasts, but to humans. Margot tried unsuccessfully to escape in the darkness, but then in the distance she saw a beam of light that grew brighter every second. Suddenly she was awakened by Genya. She was all sweaty and hot. Genya took a thermometer and took her temperature. Margot's temperature was 39.1 degrees. "Let's call an ambulance," Genya suggested to his wife, and although he didn't panic, his excitement was evident. Margot declined his suggestion, saying, "No, don't. Let me just list the names of the medicines. Which ones do you need to buy?" Genya hesitated somewhat, but agreed. Margot dictated to him the list of necessary medicines, and he drove to the pharmacy. At that time, Margot fell into sleep again, but this time she didn't dream about anything, and even if she dreamed about something, she couldn't remember. A few hours later, Genya woke Margot up. By this time, he had prepared chicken broth and bought all the necessary medicines. Genya stayed at Genya's for a couple of days, and when she felt better, she returned home, hoping that her mother and sister were no longer in her apartment. When she crossed the threshold, however, she found her mother acting as if nothing had happened. Camille asked her where she'd been missing for a few days, and she said that they'd called, but she hadn't picked up. Margot asked why they were still at her apartment. Her mother replied that they lived there and added that she had been on vacation for a few days. Genya was annoyed but didn't confront her. Her mother offered her something to eat, claiming that she had made her favorite meatballs. Margot rolled her eyes, realizing that it was useless to quarrel. She didn't ask for money, and even Eva behaved calmly. When Margot had prepared dinner, she invited everyone to the table. Although the norm was to serve dinner in complete silence, this time the silence was broken by her mother. "Margot, we need to talk," Camille said, and her daughter asked what it was about. Eva was an adult now, and Margot realized that she would soon be starting her own life. Her mother hinted at something and suggested an idea. "What do you want me to do? I've already paid her tuition and I have a big apartment. Why should we sell it and split it between the three of us? I'll add the funds from the sale of the house and buy two smaller ones. Besides, I'm already earning enough from my art," Margot objected. The mother was treating her daughter's property as if it were her own. Margot was confused and couldn't understand what this had to do with her personal apartment. "Mom, don't," said the younger sister. "We need it. We're a family. A family is supposed to live together, and we need to share everything equally." A scandal broke out. The mother yelled at the older daughter, and Margaret defended her position, and Eva kept silent because she was ashamed. This argument could have gone on forever if it hadn't been for the doorbell. It was the courier who had brought a copy of Margaret's printed novel. She turned around and went to her room, realizing that arguing with her mother was futile. As she unpacked the package and looked at the cover of her sixth novel, she felt proud. The cover was bright and attractive, and her literary pseudonym was listed at the bottom. She pulled her cell phone out of her pocket and called her editor. "Hi, it's me," she said, and the editor asked if he had gotten the book. "Yes, the book is terrific. It's going to be a smash hit," Margot praised him. "I hope so," Margaret sighed, feeling relieved. "Thanks, but we still have a lot of work to do. I've worked out a plan for the presentation." "You're so sweet," Margaret said, and although Zhenya couldn't see her smile, he could sense it in her voice. "Thanks, but I need to deal with some family issues first." "Okay, but don't take too long," Zhenya said and hung up. Margot spent a long time thinking about how to force her mother to leave the house but still convince her that it was her own decision. She started looking for a solution on the internet and found a forum where someone was describing a similar situation. After reading the comments, Margot decided that renovation might be the solution. The next morning, she called a family meeting, announcing the need for repairs. Camille couldn't understand why they needed repairs, since the apartment was new. Margot explained that the repairs were needed to sell the apartment for a higher price. Her mother asked why they needed to move out, and Margot replied that it would happen as soon as the renovations were finished. The crew would be able to complete the work in a week, and then they could put the apartment up for sale. After explaining the situation properly, Margot convinced Camille to sell the two-room apartment and split the money between the three of them. At first, Camilla said she needed some time to think about the decision, but after an hour she agreed. Seeing reason in her daughter's arguments, Camilla agreed to her proposal. The money was allocated, and soon they all moved out of the two-bedroom apartment. Margaret decided to stay with an acquaintance, Eva returned to the hostel, and their mother rented another apartment. After everyone left, Margaret called a handyman to change the locks, and now only she had the keys to the apartment. She decided to sell the apartment and buy a new place where none of her relatives would be able to find her. After doing some minor cosmetic repairs, Margaret put up an ad to sell the apartment. Camille noticed the ad, but given her daughter's promise to her, her trust was absolute. She was not vigilant or attentive. However, one sunny day, Camille discovered that the apartment had been sold and tried to call her eldest daughter over 100 times. Nevertheless, Margaret was on her way, heading to Eva. Despite the distance of 2662 kilometers, she felt happy, knowing that the past was behind her and realizing that something new was beginning. The guy next to her was happy, for they were starting this new phase together.